Welcome to the Talk Marketing Analysis for Life Sciences podcast with Covalent Bonds. I'm your host, Laura Brown, and I am Chief Effectiveness Officer here at Covalent Bonds HQ. In this podcast, we explore marketing and media analysis for life sciences, touching on topics from marketing data to our guests' biggest marketing failures and successes, because it is in learning from others that the magic happens.
Hello and welcome to our next edition of the podcast. I am joined today by Dr. Paul Kippax from Malvern Panalytical. Paul is Sector Marketing Director for the Pharma and Food Division at Malvern, and I'm really excited to have him with us today because Paul's got some great opinions that I'm looking forward to sharing with everybody. So, Paul, thank you so much for joining us.
That's all right, Laura, and it's good to chat with you again. And yes, many opinions. Let's see where that leads us as we go through this discussion. Yeah.
And that's what makes these so interesting. I love it when people have strong views, so please share them. So first of all, Paul, tell me a little bit about how you got into marketing, because I'm right in saying that you're not a marketer by background, you're a scientist, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So I've got a PhD in physical chemistry. I was actually in a project looking at how to optimize ice cream production of all things. So gets pretty boring around the dinner table when it gets to dessert with me. In fact, my wife avoids ice cream. But yes, I did that degree and I got to the end of it and I built a piece of equipment. And I thought, it would be really good to be in the analytical instrumentation business, and a role came up at what was Malvern Instruments at the time, what is now Malvern Panalytical, and I applied and I got in, and so I started as a technical specialist within the company, so it was directly relevant to the PhD that I'd just done. And in a role like that, I was part of a team supporting the sales process. So you're going out, listening to customers, trying to work out how to develop their methods, determine whether the product that I was a specialist for was relevant to their applications. And as part of that, I got the chance to go to a conference in the pharmaceutical sector looking at inhalation drug delivery. And I'm a secret needle phobic. So, COVID vaccines and things like that have been a challenge to me, although I support the vaccination. And I came back from that buzzing with the idea that actually we could do something which could help with the development of these products. Someone in the company listened to me and they went, you know what, we're looking at a project in that area. Do you want to join product management and help drive that through? And I never looked back. And I was always thankful to that person for giving me the opportunity to step in. I ran the project around that. And as part of that, and I still remember the first meeting now, I was told, well, as product manager, you have to have a marketing plan and you'll be working with an external agency. And I remember thinking, oh my goodness, how do you speak to marketeers? I'm a scientist, not a marketeer. And actually, they put me hugely at ease, the team we were working with, and suddenly realised the impact you could have through communicating effectively in all sorts of ways, not just doing scientific presentations. Mm-hmm. So that was my route in, right?
Oh, and I love that, because what it does is it highlights exactly what marketing should be. Because really, marketing is not about pushing stuff out. It's about listening to what the market needs and bringing that back into the company and then shaping everything. So it's shaping something for the market, and that's exactly what you did.
Exactly. Actually, I read a recent article, because I've got director in my title. I like to read HBR.
It is.
So
I love it too.
Well, yeah, there you go. Got to get the lingo right. And it was one that said successful brands approach customers as users and not buyers. Mm-hmm. And that really resonated with the way I approach things. What's important to me is how do I affect the life of the customer I'm working with? So that sounds a bit grand, doesn't it? But essentially, we're not interested in selling a solution if it doesn't fit a workflow, if it doesn't give a valuable outcome for the customer. And the communication then is all about, well, how do I map into that and encourage the connections that are relevant to the portfolio, to the solutions that I'm talking about. And so you're right. In many ways, the marketing approach is a direct link back to that experience of being a product technical specialist. But now you're saying, well, rather than on a one-to-one around a demo, how can you broaden that and then connect to more customers where you have something to offer? So, yeah.
Oh, I love it. I absolutely love it. So, Paul, tell me a little bit about that focus on the customer within Malvern. How do you go about making sure that you actually do know what they need and what they hear? What kind of processes do you guys use?
So it starts with a team. We have a strategic marketing team. Their role is to look out into the market, understand something about how our solutions are used, and that I suppose we'll dig into data about our current commercial activity. But first start looking beyond that. So it's very easy, for instance, as a product manager, you're interested in what the sales of this individual product, but that fits into a workflow and it answers a question that is then supported by other elements in analytical or in the science. And so that team look out into and go, well, what's happening? How are things are being used? And what do we therefore need to do to position what we do? So it starts with that engagement. It could be in conferences. It could be by doing webinars that pose questions rather than just giving answers. It could be in engaging with key accounts and holding mini symposiums where we do present our solutions, but at the same time we're asking questions. And through those activities, we go, right, okay, what does that mean for the future of where we need to go and our messaging at the moment? And so
exactly. So let's just take go back a little bit, because you mentioned about the challenges with COVID about getting in front of customers. So how did you guys pivot to start collecting this information?
So we, just like everyone else to a certain extent, we had an active webinar program and we had the platforms that were supporting that webinar program. We just sort of pivoted into that activity because all the events closed down. The events themselves went virtual, of course, but we found that there was a lot of people, a lot of time on their hands. And there was a lot of talk at the time about, as we went into the pandemic, there'll be webinar fatigue.
Yes.
People don't want to keep it. And that is something to watch out for. But we didn't really experience that there was actually almost like there was more time for people to spend time learning and engaging. And so we found that our attendance and registrations were staying at a very high level. And then other metrics we would then look at in terms of what's the response from customers. Are we getting, the basics such as leads and marketing qualified leads and those coming through to sales opportunities? Are we seeing that pipeline? We would measure that. But really, we never saw a drop off in the number of registration and that sort of general engagement that was occurring with our customer base. So that's something we pivoted to quite quickly. The other thing we were very careful on was testing if events are moving virtual, what kind of approaches are they using to replace the face-to-face interaction that would occur. And that was something where we noted there were a lot where, as a vendor, as a supplier, you felt very isolated from the program and you weren't getting any chance for that interaction. But there were other platforms which were providing, networking opportunities and the chance to build beyond someone coming up to a virtual stand and asking for a brochure. I mean, those things, again, are important, but it's also the number of conversations you're enabling. And some platforms got that right. Others, really, we found that we weren't really getting any chance for communication at all.
So do you think there's going to be a role for these going forward now that people are starting to go back to face-to-face?
Yes. I mean, and that's a challenge within Malvern Panalytical itself. As to, there was a lot of talk, wasn't there, during the pandemic about the new normal that we would have to get used to. And in fact, I think people got fed up of thinking about the new normal. Just give me normal. But actually, I'm talking to you from a workstation in the middle of my hometown, distant from my office, and I think we've learned that the company has grown with a distributed workforce. Where when we look out into our customers, they are learning the same things. So, for instance, I'm in the pharmaceutical sector. I think towards the end of last year, Sanofi made announcements as to, well, actually, our scientists come to the office on a need to interact basis. If you've got something on a project where you need to be face-to-face or you need to be present in a lab, then go in. Otherwise, remote working's the norm. And so, yes, although we see that there's an interest in face-to-face and getting back to some normal human interaction and with all the body language and stuff that goes with it, I think the virtual platforms are here to stay, really.
How do you practically get that data from the team? And which team do you work with internally that builds that and monitor it? Just in case. So what I'm thinking about is if there's somebody listening who has not quite built out persona systems in their CRM, or they're a marketing team about to start on this, what are things that you've learned that you're getting from the system that's been really valuable for you for doing your job?
What I get that's really valuable for me and my team in doing our job, and they're always open to improvement, is, I mean, the basics actually speak a lot. Segment, sub-segment, for instance. And then we have something which we call use environment, or other people call, workflow position. So is this customer in research, or are they in manufacturing QC, for instance? It just tells you a lot about the likely requirements. For instance, pharmaceuticals, regulatory requirements differ between QC compared with early phase research. That then tells me something about the kind of questions the customer may come back to me with, and therefore how we need to frame communication with them. If they're in QC, they're under pressure to release product. There's an urgency associated with that compared with someone who's in R&D that has a much more open, how do I understand this product or drug asset or whatever it is more widely. So just that basic information captured helps us. And that can be done in a multiple way. I mean, a lot of the leads that we obtain, or the first point of contact for customers, will be through the website. And it's then, I mean, there's a whole team that looks at how do we optimize the data collection from the customer. So it's a realistic taxonomy that helps us understand what they need without ending up with 3 pages of information to fill in because everyone's got a question you'd like to ask the customer.
Exactly.
Getting that balance right, and then having the means to test what's been input. And that goes through a team that then looks at the quality of that information, ensures that it's populated in a way. Then if that turns into an opportunity for the commercial teams, there's enough information there for them to know, right, what is the customer actually doing, and what are they looking for in terms of a solution scope. So there's a team that's engaged in that. And that team would be part of the, if there isn't a strong buying need yet, they'll be then looking at the nurturing requirements around that, or they would be completing the information set that then is passed on to the commercial team. So there are a number of checks, but it starts with what information do you gather? And as I said, a lot of our leads come through the website, so it's in the form design and getting that right, really. I mean, it's always amazed me about how much work's done at that end, because you can turn off customers very, very quickly with complex asks, and of course, if you're scientific by background, you go, the more I know about you, the more I'll be able to offer you, and you get dropouts.
Yeah, definitely. So that's really interesting about the multiple teams that are all involved in this process around the CRM and the marketing automation system. How do you all communicate, and how do you feed back? So, for example, if the nurture programs aren't nurturing effectively, who's responsible for feeding that back to the teams, and who changes it? How does that work?
Oh, now you're asking me to comment on stuff that is I know exists, but do I engage fully with it? What colour can I give to that? I don't know. Go for it. Ask me a follow-on question, and then I'll see
So my question is: are you involved in that? That, like, it sounds like you're not. So how do you work with those teams to make sure that it's not siloed?
The way that my team is a strategic marketing team, we sit in the sector part of our business, sensing what's happening, understanding the requirements, the messaging that may be used, and then we work with the marketing function that in Malvern Panalytical then to define, right, okay, if that's what we need to do, what does that look like in terms of campaign tactics? And then for that, how are we going to track the effectiveness of those campaigns? So that's held by a team that is in the front end of our CRM system in defining the scoring, so not only the taxonomy, but the scoring approaches that are applied. But that's not, I mean, I see the output of the magic they do in tracking the number of interactions with our content and determining whether that's the degree of a sign of interest. We're also engaged in ABM. We have an ABM program that's running, so we can sense in terms of more general search activity and website activity, whether there's resolving interest within accounts. And so there's an example of an interaction in that the strategic marketing function says, well, here are the areas we know are growing. Here are the companies engaged in that. And then we work with the ABM team who then develops up, right, here's the tracking that we're going to do. And then we'll work with the web team and say, well, if you're working in those areas, here's the content that we expect to be consumed associated with that. And we'll also optimize the web content itself. And then we'll go, well, what are the keywords you see being used by that? Right. We'll move that through. My view is that that's well known in terms of approaches, but it's informed by the strategic marketing group. But of course, we've got search engine specialists and ABM specialists who are also knowing what the requirements of those approaches are.
Yeah.
And they're informing us as to the kind of information that they need as input that would help them doing their roles more effectively. So that's something that I've always thought is important. It is easy to be siloed. Sometimes to the distraction of the teams that I work with is that I don't like silos. Just like the way I approach customers, or the way I believe we should approach customers, is we're in a partnership. What I offer adds value to their process. I'm not just selling an instrument. I'm enabling them to do something. If they can't do it with what we've offered, then actually I want to understand why, so we can make sure we don't do that again. So in working with other functions around the business, I invite them into the meetings and we get the exchange going as peers rather than, well, I've defined a marketing area I need to go to. Right, marketing, you determine what the tactics associated with that are. And to me, it's only through making those connections that actually it allows me to resolve, or my team members to resolve, well, what else do we need to bring to this in order to be more successful? So it very much mirrors the way that we all work with our customers, I think.
And exactly. And this is why I have always respected Malvern Panalytical's approach, because it absolutely is customer driven. And you hear companies say that, but it's not. Your company is built around that completely. And just the way you're talking is demonstrating that. So it's very impressive. One thing I'd like to go into a little bit more detail is you talked about you engage with the output from some of the metrics and tracking that gets put in place. What does that output look like? Is that a meeting? Is it a report? And how actionable is that kind of information that you get?
Right, so let's start with the first part of that question. We have access to various dashboards. So we use Salesforce. So within that, we can dig into detail all the way from what's happening in terms of the MQL and opportunity pipelines, all the way through to what's happening in orders and, one lost business. What's the impact? So that gives us a general data set that we can work with, and we can cut that in ways that then reflect where our campaign focus is. That gives us the pulse of the current business and gives us an idea of the pipeline that we're working with. So those dashboards are available, and as part of our monthly reporting cycle, we'll be looking at that data and determining, well, are we on track? Are we not on track? I mean, there are, linking everything up from very, very early phase interaction through to an order. That is not always straightforward, and the systems are evolving to enable that. That would be our end goal. But as it is now, we can already see, well, what's happening with each of the solutions that are associated with an application area we're driving into. Are we seeing the response that we would hope to see? So is it actionable was your next question?
Yes.
I mean, a lot of people say, if you talk to my team, they would go, yeah, Paul, he's great at concepts, actions and plans and that sort of thing. I mean, the answer is yes. And so in the tail end of last year, using the information we had in front of us, there were several sort of tactical pivots that we made to respond to the way the market was as it was and the demand that we were seeing compared with where we thought it was. And we're able to then see, right, the solution mix we're now seeing in terms of what's coming through the pipeline has changed as a result of those pivots. And I suppose that's another thing I'd learned, that, predicting the future is an imprecise business at best.
Yeah.
So always be prepared to pivot. And there are sometimes you have to make very tactical decisions in response to the data, and that's okay. But hold your vision in your head, because you'll need to get back to it. Don't allow the tactical nature of things to diffuse things so much that you can't see your way ahead anymore. But it's a commercial business. It's got commercial needs. So the answer is yes, it is actionable. And what's good for me is to have the linkages into the marketing teams, both in terms of program management, website management and field marketing, to say, okay, this is what we can do, and to partner in defining a response.
Yeah, and you touched on a really important point there about making decisions on the data, because really data does not give you definitive answers. They just give you signposts, and then you use those within what the strategy is at the company to keep moving forward. And I love that. That is a very important point to make.
Well, that's one thing that I have to reflect on personally, because there's an element where, to different degrees, people will either trust data or they trust their their guts, their instincts in a situation. And what I have to be careful of in the way that I interact with people or understand things, that there's a point where I go, my gut's enough.
Yeah.
And I need the people around me that go, oh no, the data isn't pointing to that. But then to me, it's that actually the gap between the two can resolve what your action is. And that's what I really like. So it isn't that only data speaks or an instinct isn't, and gut isn't important. Actually, it's the combination of the two that allows you to resolve an action and can lead to innovation as well in the way you approach things. That's a view.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, and I completely agree with you, because you also see it in the fear that people have about the new marketing systems that come in, and they see marketing automation that might take away people's roles. And actually it's not. It's that, like you said, it's that combination of this just gives you the tools to be better at your job, but you need to be able to interpret what that's telling you and act on it.
It's getting back to, you're right. And actually, that's the theme in the pharmaceutical sector. With talk about AI and machine learning approaches and things like that, people go, oh, is that a risk to automation? Is that a risk to jobs? No. When we've talked to customers, this is part of what my team did, we hear them going, actually, it will release us to do the work that we were here to do in the first place, because we were held back by having to collect all this data or having to align it ourselves and doing things like that. You're right in that the automation gives you access to data that you can interpret and propose a route forward, and then allows you to test that, but it isn't telling you the answer necessarily, or not always.
Exactly. And the other side of it that we see a lot is it also removes a lot of the emotion out of the marketing, which we see a lot in the scientific space, where there's some skepticism often about what marketing can do, but bringing that data can help you make decisions and have more credibility in those conversations. Do you find that internally?
Yes, but I was interested in what you said, taking the emotion out of it. I wonder whether there's also a challenge in scientific marketing and going, yes, we not forgetting that element of emotion. So I don't know. People say that when I talk, they can get that I'm quite passionate about the company and what it does. I think that the communicating that, and allowing that enthusiasm to set a direction is important too. So
yeah,
something I had to learn was that, because I always went, oh well, is this getting excited and and less precise? Is that really relevant in the way we approach things? Do we have to be? And you go, well, yeah. So yes, it helps in that in the end we are a commercial business. The rubber hits the road. We got to prove we're doing the right things and not just fly in the dark. But
yeah. Well, there's two elements to this. There's the emotion of making marketing decisions internally, but there's also the emotion in the communicating and engaging with your customers, right? And I think one thing that's really important that we see a lot, and we hear in the language in our space, which is we're talking to scientists, it's different here. But people forget that scientists are people, and they make decisions on emotion in exactly the same way. And the fact that we have to be precise and accurate in our statements should be the same across any industry. It shouldn't be any different.
When people tell me that I'll work with scientists, we've got to talk about data, I go, well, sit down. Why don't you ask the person that you're with, if you're doing an interview, why they do what they do? And just maybe go to the third why. Okay, this one doesn't work with everyone, but a lot of people, you'll suddenly hit something. And I remember talking to one scientist in a large pharmaceutical company, and we were talking about a particular way of making tablets. And you can get caught up in the physical chemistry and things like that about how he makes the tablets. And of course, we're going, I wonder whether our solutions are relevant to him. At the third why, he said why he did it, which in his case was to do with the fact that he saw that the problems that doctors had in prescribing medicines to children, because the dosage forms were created for adults. And so the prescribing physician had to take a risk in deciding how do they shave apart a tablet in order to get the right dose in. And there was no support for that and often no insurance. They were taking a risk. And he saw that if he got this bit right, he could make it that they could design the product they needed in the hospital that they could give to the child and get the dose right. You go, wow.
That is cool.
Now that gives me a completely different view. Here's all this science in here, and here's how we think about it, but actually the link is through to this, and this what drives this guy. And he got emotional about it. So yeah, he's deeply scientific, and he is a great scientist and understands why he's doing it. But what's his personal motive? And there's personal motivation in anything, even if it's just, I want to get enough of this project done so I can go home on Friday and forget about work. It could be as basic as that, or it could be more extensive in that I know that if I get this right, I affect something that's really going to be quite beneficial to society, and access that, and suddenly you go, yeah, data is important, but there is an definite emotional side to science.
Oh, Paul, I love that. And thank you for that anecdote, because that really brings this conversation to a perfect close. And it's made me quite emotional as well. So I really appreciate it. And I do want to ask you one question, because at the end of every podcast that we do, we ask a question that our previous interviewee asked. So Michael Allen, who's VP of Marketing at Metro, asked, what's the next big change for the scientific industry in establishing a personal connection with customers? Do you have a view on that?
Yes, so that was I felt that was a good question, because it echoed, in fact, it links back to some of what we were talking about. The next big change for me, it's that balancing face-to-face with remote. Not just jumping back and going, well, we'll access the same paradigm or approaches that existed before the pandemic, because it's not going to happen. And then going, well, if that's what's going to happen, how do we create space for our customers to engage more openly? And so very much, if you think about a webinar, it can be very much on broadcast mode. And somehow we've now got to get the response that, one of the sales team I was talking to recently said, yeah, we used to chat over a coffee with a customer, and that's when I got all the general information. And now when I'm in a remote situation, it seems like we're on the tram tracks and we'll just discuss the thing that's happening and everyone wants to close the meeting down. And right, that's quite a challenge in marketing then. If we're remote, how do we make something where it isn't just we're delivering this remotely and it's a set of train track, then we'll get to the end of it. How do you open up the space to build that rapport? Because of course it's in that you're learning the context and you're able to refine the message that and engage the customer. And I'm not sure that, I don't know, I'm open to other people who listen to the podcast to come with answers. I'm not sure we've got an answer to how to achieve that, because humans, we respond to things like body language and and eye contact, and whether our hands are flying around when we're talking or they're in our back pockets, and we use those as signals and as to whether we can ask a deeper question and things like that. And it's hard remotely.
Yeah.
And I noticed there was one other scientific instrument company who has gone all the way to creating a virtual building where they could do demos and seminars and interact with equipment and things like that. And you go, well, is that the future? That it's all to do with, and of course that feels a bit cool. We'll all be wearing headsets and hand gloves, and that is it. So almost replicating the physical experience and the presence virtually, although that feels quite expensive. But you go for it. Is that it, or is there something else? And I think that's a challenge.
Yeah, exactly. And I saw a great example the other week of companies using holograms. So you have these like pods, and they had them at conferences where people couldn't travel, and the pod came up and it literally projected a CEO of the company into the room, and the pod acts as a speaker as well, so they can hear the conversation, and it's literally like they were in the room. And it was incredible. So there are some fascinating things, but again, it's going to be like cost, obviously, and feasibility of these. But I think this is going to be a really interesting place to watch.
And of course, you can go to very, very low tech, which is, things like, was it Google Cardboard? Was that where you end up being able to put your mobile phone in front of your eyes and look like you're, that sounds wacky, but there are all sorts of opportunities around marketing and branding of that you could take, and you wonder, could that be the way we do it? And we'll suddenly be a bunch of people spending even more time staring at our phones. But in all justice, that part of it, we looked at our webinar programs in it. We were intrigued that people in India were logging onto them very, very late. When we then look at what they're logging onto, they're watching it on their mobile devices, probably from home.
Yeah.
So, well, what does that mean? Is there something we learn from that?
I love it.
In Malvern Panalytical, we've just released our company video, and within it, we're amazed at the impact that we have. So how do you include that as part of the communication? We're not just we do want to sell instruments, we do want to sell services, but it's broader than that. And how can you engage in that part of the messaging, that there's a deeper drive here as to what we want to achieve without it becoming a bit like, greenwashing? So how do you get the mix right? How do you communicate that? Because increasingly differentiation isn't going to be through spec points on an instrument. In fact, I wonder whether those days are dead already.
Yeah.
I remember when I was a product manager first, it was arm wrestling over whether my particle sizing system could go down to 30 nanometers, whereas that one over there claims it's 20, so they must be better. And you go, no, that's just pointless. There's another reason why I'm here. And how do you get that across effectively, but not in a way that's just wash?
Yes.
That says, oh, look, we're interested in a bigger picture, or well done. Everyone says that. And to me, it is the use of that emotion and engagement bit. There was a marketeer that I read a lot of books from, and I recently heard him in a podcast with Simon Sinek.
Yes, I was about to say that.
and it's a guy called Seth Godin, and everyone laughs that I mention his name because he looks like a proper marketeer, and one day I'll look like that too. He always talked about talking to your tribe, and it's the people who get you who are the people you should talk to, and that then people who get you isn't just that they understand that the product you have could, has a specification that fit. People that get you understand your approach to things. Mm-hmm. And that's the people that you stay with. And people who don't get you, how much do we need to worry ourselves about that? So the question is in there. And I'll direct anyone listening to this. Seth Godin's books, there were two. There's Tribes, but then there was one about your personal approach to things, which was Linchpin. I go back to them and I read them again and again. And people go, yeah, you really are a marketeer, not a scientist now. But I think that it says a lot about, engagement.
Yeah, absolutely. And just going back to the Simon Sinek mention as well, because he summarizes it absolutely perfectly. And he said, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And that is exactly what you have been describing through this whole thing. And it is one thing that has really impressed me, both of you and Malvern Panalytical. You guys are getting this right. And I just want to say well done. And it's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast today. So thank you so much, Paul. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Laura, for this opportunity. And you've put a smile on my face in saying that. And I hope that the people listening can take something from that. In the end, their inner passion is important in marketing. And alongside, data is important. Being able to understand where your customers are in the buyer's journey is important. But the bit that you bring that's unique to it is what you and your company holds as its vision. And I think customers are interested in that, just like we're interested in our customers.
Oh, what a perfect place to end. Thank you so much.